Hey everybody, welcome back. This is going to be part 5 of What If Luffy Had the Storm Fruit, and with no recaps, no asking you to subscribe or anything like that, let's get right into part 5. We see the Going Merry reach the top of Reverse Mountain with the Straw Hat crew aboard it, and as it jumps over the peak of it and starts heading back down, or in a different direction, but still downwards, they see a little bit of a silhouette, or maybe something that's in front of them. It almost looks like another mountain. But they know that there shouldn't be one there, and as they start getting closer, they realize that it's not some kind of mountain, it's a giant whale that's in front of them. So, sailing downwards into it, they can't really do anything, except for Luffy, who at the last moment, because they still can't use the rudder because it's broken, would start pushing the ship over to the left of the whale, which is about the only opening that they can get through without crashing into the wall. So, sailing by it, Luffy would look over at the giant whale and would basically be wondering exactly what its deal was, why he did that kind of thing. And to his surprise, he can actually somewhat understand it. He can almost hear the pleas of the whale to basically take the mountain down. So, getting curious, he would decide to jump up and see exactly what's going on with this thing, because apparently he can communicate with it, and so, landing on top of its head, he would start to communicate with the giant whale, and realizes that it does indeed understand human speech, until he sees something a little bit odd. He sees a hatch that leads into the whale. Really confused by this, he's about to go check it out. However, the whale would once again open its mouth, sucking in a bunch of water, and from basically the sea, just to try to catch some food for itself. That's basically why it was there in the first place. However, this has an unintended side effect, and because Luffy is away from the ship, there's not much he can do about it, as the Going Merry would get sucked into Laboon. I know I could have done like a whole thing where it's like, oh, they just kind of sail by and ignore it and keep going on into the, into the Grand Line, but like, come on, that's boring. We got to have the Laboon with like Vivi and all of them scene. Like, come on now, come on. So Luffy, getting kind of pissed and seeing that the whale was about to go back under, would enter the hatch and enter the whale in and of itself, which he found really odd that the whale had like a tunnel system basically going into itself, but he decides to ignore that small little fact for now and just heads down into the whale. And he meets some odd people that are in front of him. That would, of course, be Baroque Works, and specifically Mrs. Wednesday and Mr. I don't really know his name, nobody cares. I think he's like Mr. 10 or something. It doesn't really fucking matter. So anyway, deciding that he wants to figure out what is going on here, he would basically appear right behind the two, going so fast that they didn't even really see him move, and he asks what they're doing here. They would basically explain, or basically, proclaim, that they are trying to hunt this whale down because it could feed their island for months, for maybe even years. And so, getting this kind of explanation, Luffy, realizing how much pain the whale is in, would basically kind of get mad at this and decides to take them down basically further into the whale. And as he breaks through a door, he is going to basically be flying down towards the stomach acid of the whale, where he also sees the Going Merry and all of his crew members seemingly having some kind of weird tense situation with the man. Yes, because even though that is odd, there is a man sitting on what seems to be some kind of island, just kind of reading a newspaper while having a conversation with them. Landing down on the deck of the ship, Luffy would look around and ask what exactly is going on, and why the hell does this whale have this kind of stuff in it? Screaming at this point, Nami would say, so we really are in a whale then? Like, trying to figure out what's going on. Luffy would nod and say, yeah, this whale is weird. Like, it has all of this shit, but it also has, like, tunnel systems, like, leading through it to get into it from the top. There's, like, a little hatch. It's really odd. Getting this explanation, Luffy would look over towards the old man, who's basically sitting there reading a newspaper, and he'd ask who he is. Well, you should probably introduce yourself, since you're the one who intruded on my little resort over here. And Luffy would begin to explain him, or basically introduce himself. I am Monkey D. And he gets cut off as the man says that he is Crocus, and explains his blood type, some of his hobbies, and basically, it's just saying that he's kind of weird. I don't really know what his deal was, if it was like a bit, but I don't really know. But he basically does that whole thing, and Luffy, getting a sweat drop down his head, would say, well then, why the hell are you asking me to introduce myself if you're just going to cut me off in the middle? And so, looking up at him, Crocus would give him a little bit of a glare before basically going back to reading his newspaper. Luffy, obviously kind of confused by this point, starts to have a conversation with the man about the whale and what exactly is going on, and learns that the whale's name is Laboon, and he has been smashing himself up against the Grand Line for years now. And we also have to remember that the Baroque work members are basically still just kind of in Luffy's hands because he knows exactly what they're doing. He's not just going to let them do what they want. But at this point, he would release them because he kind of forgets about them as he's having this conversation with Crocus, until they get interrupted when they would proclaim that they are going to kill the whale and bring it to their hometown. Obviously, Crocus, not having this, would jump in front of the basically rocket launchers that they pulled out. However, before he can even get hit by them, they seemingly just kind of disappear from everybody's sight except Crocus. I'm gonna assume Crocus is a lot stronger than a lot of people think he is, because, like, he was on Roger's crew. He's, like, old guy like Rayleigh. Like, come on now. He's got to be at least a little bit strong, but anyway, that doesn't really matter right now. And so we basically see those rockets in Luffy's hands completely, basically, already destroyed, and there wasn't even any explosion, which really confuses everybody there, especially the two members who just shot those rockets. Luffy, walking up to them, would basically chop them over the back of the neck, knocking them out temporarily, and tells his crew to grab some rope and tie him up. So, doing so, they would continue their conversation that they were having, and you'd get the explanation that he's basically trying to help Laboon. And he can't really do that from the outside, so he decided to start living inside of the whale. And explains where the exit is and everything of that sort, and they would begin to head out through a canal, which is in the whale after Laboon once again surfaces and stops banging his head against the Grand Line. After exiting, they go over to the lighthouse, I think it is what it was, and they begin talking once more, and after learning, like, the whole story of why Laboon is in this situation in the first place, that being that some people, or like a crew, basically disappeared from the Grand Line a long time ago, many years, and that crew made a promise to Laboon that they would come back once they were finished sailing the Grand Line, but they never did. Getting this explanation and wanting to help Laboon out a little bit, Luffy would jump up into the air and use his wind to basically fly, and glides over to the front of Laboon and would punch him straight in the face with a wind-enhanced punch, sending Laboon completely flying. As Laboon roars into the sky and would start charging towards Luffy, he would hold up his hand, using a little bit of his conqueror spirit to basically enforce his will upon the creature. He would say that, "We can do this some other time. Once I get back from sailing around the Grand Line, we can have a true contest of strength between the two of us. However, until that time comes, don't hit your head anymore." And so we have a similar scene playing out where we see Luffy drawing the Storm Pirates' crest, or the Storm Pirates' basically flag, on Laboon's head, and basically telling him not to scuff it up or anything of that sort. Laboon would be crying along with Crocus because he's never really seen somebody this nice before. Nami would be smiling over to herself, knowing that Luffy really was a very different pirate from what she had the interpretation of knowing, and everybody would basically just be smiling at this scene that plays out, including Vivi, who had woken up at this point, realizing that this guy seemed actually kind of nice. So they decide to basically try to figure out how they're going to sail on the Grand Line, because Nami figures out, as she screams, that she can't actually use a compass here. Looking over at her, Luffy begins to wonder exactly what's going on, and as Crocus is beginning to explain the concept of log poses and everything like that, and that every different island here has a different magnetic force, meaning that compasses are completely useless, because they just kind of go everywhere, would explain a log pose, and that it locks onto the magnetic force of a specific island, and this is where Luffy would walk over, as he picked something up off of Mr. 10. I still don't know if that's what he actually is, but I'm just going to go with that. He picked up a weird object. It seemingly had a compass, but it was inside of a weird globe thing that was on somebody's wrist. Handing it over to Nami, Nami would ask if this is what he is talking about, and Crocus would nod. Realizing that that was their only way home, Vivi would ask them to take them with them because that's where that log post is actually set to go, and they need to go back to their home. Luffy, deciding to just kind of humor them and see where the situation goes because he's kind of curious at this point, would decide to allow them to come with. Until Vivi gets very frightened as she's looking up into the sky. Looking over, Luffy sees an odd sight. It's a otter and some kind of bird, and they're taking a picture of them, and it's kind of weirding him out. And Vivi quickly explains what they are and that they're going to go back to Baroque works and everything of that sort. Luffy, deciding to deal with the situation and also cut off a little bit of the communication that they are going to be having, would simply raise his hand up into the sky as lightning bolts would strike down, knocking the two out of the sky and into the ocean, where they would stay for the rest of their, existence, not life. They're dead, so that doesn't really count there. So anyway, they decide at that point that they're going to leave after saying goodbye to Crocus and Laboon, and so they start heading off. Using Luffy's Wind Logia Devil Fruit powers, it's a lot easier to stay on course because he's able to manipulate the wind around him into sailing in a specific direction. So even if, the winds and everything like that change, they are still pretty easily, or even the water, the currents change and everything like that. But again, Luffy has the power to completely alter everything around him with the weather. So they sail basically completely straight. They don't really ever have to check their log post that often, and at one point, Vivi basically yells at them, saying that they're too inexperienced to deal with stuff like this. However, they would basically ignore her and decide to just, continue on going with their lives. They would be basically having a little bit of a party and celebration for entering the Grand Line, and Sanji would end up freeing Vivi, and she would start joining along with the festivities with everybody else. They'd be drinking, talking, having a lot of fun together, until they arrive at the island that they were attempting to go to, which I don't know the exact name of it, but I'm going to call it Cactus Island, because that's what it looks like, except it's a bunch of gravestones, but we don't talk about that. So, Vivi and Mr. 10, or Mr. whatever, Mr. 12, I don't know, but they would both jump off the ship and run across the water, running towards the island. And as a dense fog would overtake them, everybody would be prepared and on guard until they start hearing cheers from the silhouettes that they were seeing. And then, as the island comes into full view and they pass through the fog, they see a giant welcoming party, basically welcoming the pirates and telling them that they can have good luck on their journey and, they have to party together, tell them stories and everything like that. Luffy would look at the rest of his crew and basically tell them, because he can kind of sense emotions at this point, that they should be on guard, but just to go along with it for the time being. Everybody would nod at him, and they would begin the festivities around the island. Everybody would be drinking, they'd be having a drinking competition, which Luffy would win, and everybody would begin to get completely knocked out. Well, that's what they want you to think. And so we see a little bit of a meeting in the background between the Baroque work members, basically the agents, having a conversation about, why do we even need to do this? Why don't we just get rid of them and not have to waste so much money and time and, basically just try to make these pirates at home? Why are we even doing this? It doesn't even make sense for us to do it. And this is where Igaram, or Igarapoi, whatever, would explain exactly who Luffy is. He is the biggest name new pirate, basically, right now, and he has a bounty of 100 million. Everybody would be completely shocked by this, and they would begin to question whether or not they should even try to do this, or if they should just try to let him go. However, that is where a voice basically breaks into their conversation. This would, of course, be Zoro announcing himself as there, and also had a little bit of bloodlust, because he hasn't really been able to fight a lot of opponents because of Luffy, because he usually just completely decimates the, rank and file kind of people. So we see Zoro having a little bit of fun. Luffy, over on the other rooftop, would be looking down at this scene, watching it play out, as Zoro would pretty easily, and completely by himself, decimate everybody around him. Until, eventually, Luffy decides that this is about long enough for him, and he jumps down. It's only the main members left, that being Igarapoi, Vivi and Mr. 10. I still don't know if it's Mr. 10. I don't think it is anymore. I think it might be Mr. 14 or some shit. I can't remember. But you know who I'm talking about. That weird guy who was Vivi's partner originally and had no impact on the story whatsoever. Yeah, that guy. That's who we're talking about now. And so, as Luffy would jump down, telling Zoro congratulations, and Zoro would say thanks, Captain. Everybody would be kind of shocked by this because they were under the impression that Zoro was probably like the captain and Luffy was like some kind of figurehead, where, you know, he just got the bounty when he shouldn't have. Would realize that Luffy was strong as well, but otherwise Zoro wouldn't be basically submitting to him like this. So everybody is basically, you know, really tense until two new people would appear. This would be Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine, the, you know, freaking light lady and heavy lady, if you really want to go there. And the bomb guy who, you know, uses fucking... I still am really, like, weirded out by the fact that that guy can, like, use his boogers as bombs and shit. And that's his, like, main way of attacking people. Any part of his body can fucking explode. Any fluid, anything of that sort. And he uses his... like, just, like... It makes me kind of angry. You know what I mean? So, anyway, we see those two people would arrive, and they would basically say that there are traitors in Baroque Works, and they've figured out the boss's secret. Luffy, getting even more interested now, would watch as Mr. 5 starts charging towards Vivi, but decides to intervene at this moment. He hasn't even had a chance to stretch his legs yet, so he decides that he has had enough of, you know, watching everything playing out. And so, landing in front of Vivi with a single punch to the head, he would knock out Mr. 5 before disappearing in a lightning bolt and reappearing behind Miss Valentine. He would chop her on the neck as well, and with that, they would both simply be knocked unconscious. Now, Luffy, extremely curious about the developments that are playing out right now, would look over at the two people that just got accused of basically being traitors, and would ask them exactly what the situation is. Vivi and Igaram would be looking back and forth between each other, wondering if they should tell these people or not, but decide that even if they don't, all they'll do is try to, like, torture them for information or something, because they're still under the view that these are normal pirates. So they explain their situation, and Igaram, realizing the strength that Luffy and his crew would have, including his bounty, would basically start begging him to, you know, help them out. They would be able to reward them in the future for it, or the king would, and that they would just be a big help right now. Luffy, deciding he doesn't really care about, you know, not helping them, or doesn't really care about money like Nami, would simply say, sure, why not, we'll go with you, after he learns that Vivi is a princess, and everything would play out pretty similarly. Igaram would dress up as Vivi, as ugly and not realistic as that looked, and would jump on a ship and start sailing off. However, that ship would go up in a huge explosion. Luffy, realizing that they need to get out right now, would grab Vivi and would start running towards the ship as he yells at his crew that they are leaving, they are setting sail, and they are not coming back because somebody is already here and they don't know how. So, setting sail, Vivi would be screaming about her duck until Karoo would show himself and they would realize that he is already on board. And so they begin setting sail, until a mysterious and uninvited new person would arrive. This would, of course, be Robin, or Mrs. Sunday. As Vivi would scream out her name, Mrs. Sunday, she would be asking what she did to Igaram, why she even, like, let them, you know, follow her in the first place, and if she did let them follow her, why did she report it? Getting the explanation that she was basically just trying to do this as a game. It's just so entertaining to watch a little princess trying to go up against an organization like ours. It was just too sad. I couldn't help but get involved in the story. So, getting this kind of explanation, Vivi would be completely pissed knowing that Robin has just been playing games with her this entire time, and would scream out, basically, Mrs. Sunday. So, everybody would draw their weapons and point them at her until she raises up her hands, and all of their weapons would get slapped away, nobody even noticing what happened except for Luffy, who saw everything. And, of course, he knows that she has a devil fruit power and would yell out to his crew, "All of you guys be careful, she has a devil fruit power that allows her to seemingly sprout maybe body parts, or all I saw was hands, so we're gonna go with that for now." Everybody, understanding this message, would nod and with a serious look, would look at her once again, until Luffy starts walking closer to her. As he walks up and basically tells her in complex terms, "Get off my fucking ship." Robin, getting a little bit nervous now, remembering that this boy, as she seemingly thought of him, actually was a pirate with a 100 million berry bounty, and not only that, he had a Logia devil fruit, and he was probably just as strong as Crocodile. Realizing this is probably not exactly the greatest situation for her, she would take a couple of steps back before basically saying that she is not here to try to harm them in any way. She's actually here to not only give them a gift, but also some advice. And that would be that they shouldn't go to the island that they are going to, and giving them a log pose or an eternal pose, she would say that this is set to a island very close to Alabasta. However, Crocodile and nobody has any knowledge of it. Crushing the device in his hand, Luffy would say that nobody decides where this ship goes except for me. Got that? Robin would nod at him with a little bit of a cold sweat running down her head, and she would once again use her devil fruit powers. She would try to take Luffy's hat. However, before she can even realize that anything happened, Luffy's hat would be back on his head, and he would be holding something in his hand. And that would be Robin's cowboy hat. And she didn't even see him move. Realizing now even more the situation she was in, if she made the wrong move, she would die and would be completely hopeless to even try to face against him right now, would start backing up a little bit nervously and basically saying that she will take her leave now, and she did not mean any offense by anything that she just said. Wondering if their captain was genuinely just going to let her go and do whatever, Luffy would appear in front of Robin as he looks at her and says, "So, give me one good reason why I should just let you leave right now. Why should I let you just walk off of my ship?" Robin, nervously backing up with sweat running down her forehead, would back up into the corner of the ship, or a corner of the ship, and would be back up against the wall. Luffy walking towards her until they are standing almost nose to nose, with Luffy looking into her eyes with a very intense stare. And no, I do not mean romantically, if you're thinking that. I mean, like, very intimidatingly, if that's even a fucking word. But he would ask, once again, "Why should I let you get off my ship?" Robin, even more nervous at this point, would begin to stutter, something that she hasn't done for in years. And just trying to get out of this situation at this point, realizing just how dangerous of a man she basically walked onto the ship of, would begin to stutter out that I can give you information on the different numbered agents, and I won't report this to Crocodile either. Realizing that this could be a good situation, along with being able to read Robin's emotions, he would be able to tell that she doesn't actually seem all that bad. She's just a little bit kind of in the wrong place, kind of thing. And so Luffy decides that he's going to allow her to leave as she jumps off of the ship, jumping onto her turtle, which kind of odd to me, but she rides a turtle, and she would begin to leave, as she'd be thinking to herself that that was a very stupid idea to even get on board that ship, and she could have been dead at any moment, as she notices for the first time that her hat is back on her head, and once again she had no clue when he even did that. Even more nervously now, she would have a nervous smile on her face with a little bit of a cold sweat running down her forehead. She would basically decide that she would try to join basically whatever the winning side would be at this point, because even she realizes it. That Crocodile, as strong as he is, and as strong as his title is, might not be enough to defeat that man. And so we see the Straw Hat crew as they would be basically questioning him why he even let her go. And Luffy would simply say that she had her own reasons to be doing this, and who was he to get in the way of that? They simply nod at this, knowing that their captain did some of the things that he does a little bit weirdly, they decide to just go along with it. And so we have a little bit of a time skip where we see Luffy taking a nap, or not even a nap, he's just going to bed because it's the middle of the night at this point, and we see him going to bed. However, a knock would come at his door, and this would of course be Nami once again. And as she walks into the bedroom, I'm not even going to say she knocks, she probably just fucking walks in at this point, like, come on now. As she walks into the bedroom and lays down next to Luffy, she would basically just begin sleeping with him. She doesn't really have any bad intentions or dirty intentions. It's not really bad, but she doesn't really have any intentions like that. She just felt really safe and comfortable whenever she was with him, and whenever she is sleeping with him, she always gets a nice night with pleasant dreams and no kind of nightmares or horrors from her past. So that's why she decides to sleep with him from now on. So, as they wake up in the next morning, everybody would begin to get ready because Nami said that they were going to arrive at the next island very soon. And of course, they do, and this would be Little Garden. However, this is where I'm going to have to leave this part off at, so I'm sorry for making it a little bit shorter than my last, 4, but I'll see you guys in the next part. Peace out, bye.